I'm Brian. I am a full stack engineer at Neokova, a fintech company, an organization. Right now, primary focus for me is just having a firmer grasp on security. I especially just kind of want to get your insights specifically and just hear what you had to say.
Quite multiple times throughout the day. Well, I'm working as an IT cloud lead for the organization called Accenture, and I have multiple clients for whom I'm trying to build in and trying to develop some of the microservices applications wherein we can make use of DevOps and use Kubernetes, kubectl, and the other important aspects, and try to bring in the DevOps and security in hand and make sure like the applications which are developed and are like have all the security and the compliance. So this is something which I'm currently working on, and I have like as per the meeting invite which I got, and as per the information which I've filled in and the information which I've read, I was expecting and I am expecting a lot of DevOps information on the security aspect, which would be quite good for me, and probably I can gain something in my knowledge and I can take it forward. Thank you.
Great. Hey, I'm over from Neokova as well, with Brian and I are co-workers, and Thor, our head of development, sent over the details, and mostly just wanting to be a fly on the wall and soak up whatever I can.
Daniel, have we ever met before? Daniel, you want to say something about yourself? Daniel's a smart guy, just graduated, I believe.
Okay. Hi.
Oh, say something about yourself. Tell us, tell the team that you may be working on a cool NASA project. I've heard.
Okay. Like which one?
Oh, maybe the NASA project I'm on.
Okay. I'm working on a Inspire a project to. I'm really bad at describing this. Set up like a networking space for, well, at least I'll help NASA figure out how to set up a networking space for like communicating with their satellites and stuff.
Great. Well, thanks for we have Dr. Apurva Modi. Dr. Modi, would you just say something about yourself to all our other developers on the line?
Hey, Junit, how are you?
You can turn on your camera if you want for a second. Great. Well, thanks for we have Dr. Apurva Modi. Dr. Modi, would you just say something about yourself to all our other developers on the line?
Hey, Junit, how are you? So actively working on many projects. We got 2 NASA projects. So I'm the founder and CEO of Aeronaclis, and working with Junaid on one of the NASA projects. We've got one 5G on dynamic spectrum sharing project. And one of the things that we are doing is trying to convert all these government funded projects into something, into commercial product, right? So using the government funded money or funding to create a product, or at least part of the, the first step to some product that we can commercialize.
Great, thank you and then we have Venkat. Venkat, want to just say something about yourself?
Yeah, myself, Venkat Uputhola. So I'm working as a senior developer for the Sherwin-Williams. So there we are mainly handling the customer accounts and business across the North America. So we are using a couple of cloud and ETL products and to achieve the data integration as well as the business intelligence solutions. So my main role is a senior developer come associate architect.
Great. So I want to just, sorry, there's a bit of noise from my house. Just tell you why we're doing this, what we hope to, as XQ to get out of it, but more importantly, what we want you to get out of it. So I'm going to start at the 100,000 foot level because some of you know what XQ does, some of you do not. So what we are doing is zero trust data protection. And when you think about zero trust, there's a lot of companies out there, but they're really doing zero trust as a network. So for example, just taking a step back, zero trust is a very specific security model where we have this notion of identity and authorization. So in Zero Trust, everything has a name, like a human being. Your phone has a name. The software program in the phone can have a name, or the software program in the cloud. And then what you do is you look at the names of those items, and then you look at the authorization. So the Zero Network, and we of course see a lot of products from Cisco and Palo Alto that Zero Trust, and that's fine. But what we want to do as a company is create Zero Trust at the data layer. So that, and the reason for that is there's a lot more data than networking, and you have data going from mobile phones to clouds to Apurva's kind of work. You have data going across a space network. You might have data in an accounting system going from a client to back office, and you want to protect it. So XQ is developing Zero Trust as a data for Zero Trust data protection solution. Now, one of the things we are doing in the discussing as a group, what do you think of Zero Trust? What do you want out of it? What kind of API calls? But the other thing we're working on, and this is an iterative process, is the business model. We want to basically create a business model where XQ is free for developers. And but we want to be careful about using the term open source, because as you know, the problem with open source, when you just throw code out there, or people are just adding code, the quality of the code is very variable. So we need support. So one of the things we want to explore with developers, with all of you, is what kind of business model would make sense. And this is truly meant to be an interactive, open discussion, because we want to create a Zero Trust architecture that makes sense for you as an individual developer, whether you're working for a private, in terms of what do they want in terms of intellectual property for the endpoint. So with that, I'm going to put, I'm going to ask Brian to do a demo, but before I ask Brian to do a demo, Mark is on the line, who's one of the program managers for XQ, and he's been spending a lot of time on just thinking about business models and open source. And like I said, we want this to be a win for the developers. We want you to have Zero Trust. So Mark, I know I'm putting him on the spot. He's in schedule to talk, but since he's here, Mark, I don't know if you wanted to share a few thoughts in terms of what you think, what works, and then kind of creating this partnership with the developers, so it's a win between the developer community and XQ, and more importantly, a win for them. Mark's not scheduled to talk, but since he's here, Mark, do you want to share a few thoughts?
Sure. So one of the things, I mean, of course, with any sort of developer enablement program that we want to sort of move forward with, is to provide developers with both tools and documentation and examples that make it easier for you to implement XQ into your product. And so we have a number of SDKs, we have a number of tools that we're working on to sort of make XQ easier to implement. But that's one of those things that is going to be sort of a long-running project. And I'd be really curious, for instance, when any of you come to a new piece of the technology stack, what's sort of the first thing that you look at? Are you looking at the API endpoints? Are you looking for SDKs? Are you looking for documentation? I'd really love to hear some feedback on sort of where you go first.
Mark, I think those are great questions. And, after we go through XQ and talk a little bit about DevSecOps and some of the different APIs and, how you can use encryption as an API, we'll go through those questions with all of the attendees. And, we're really eager to hear from all of you guys to make sure that we make it the best experience for developers so that you are likely to use our product.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to ask Brian Wayne, who's the CEO of XQ, put him on the spot. Actually, have him perhaps show you a few screens of what XQ is doing. But as Kelby mentioned, it's not just what we think, it's what you think as developers. What are you looking for in terms of how do you want the tools packaged, but also how do you think about Zero Trust at whatever level of expertise, because this is just the first kind of developer meeting. So with that, Brian, would you want to introduce yourself and show people some cool stuff?
Sure. Sounds good. Thanks, guys. And thank you, everyone, for showing up and giving us your time. It's very valuable. I know that everyone's really pressed, so we really appreciate that. I'm just going to run through a couple of slides that just explain what the thing is, and then show you our developer portal. I'd love to get some feedback on, does it make sense? Does it seem to be the sort of thing that you would want to use? That kind of thing. Is it set up in a way that is easy to use? All that's really important to us. So I think that some of the things that just to reiterate some things that Junaid talked about before, we think about what zero trust is right now. We look at and Junaid helped invent zero trust. So when we think about the way that it's come to market up to this point, there's things like Fails and Palo Alto, which are very network-based, it's hardware-based, where the network is the perimeter. And what we're thinking of is the data being the perimeter for the network. So basically being able to create private channels on public networks where the data itself is self-protecting. The data knows when it can be read, where it can be read, who can read it, and when it expires. You can add other meta tags there as well. But basically, this idea that instead of building a taller fence, I'm going to protect the dog. I'm going to encrypt the dog so the dog can go play in whatever yard it wants to, right? And now this can live either on a server that we host or on-prem for you for regulated entities, and those two entities can talk to one another. So we're essentially streaming quantum random numbers from a quantum computer to the edge to make edge applications much smarter, edge devices a lot smarter. We slice and dice the data, and then we encrypt all those little packets separately. And actually that happens within SDKs that we provide for free to developers, right? And so each one of those packets then travels across whatever pipe it normally would, whether it's AWS or Azure or router or your phone or your laptop. And then on the other side, the data is reconstituted. And what this does is it gives you, and this is really the innovative part of it. Yes, it's stronger encryption and it's more flexible, but really it's this network architecture, and specifically that Junaid has architected, that allows you to view and control your data after it leaves your network, when you don't have control over it anymore, right? If it's on someone else's data center, you know every encryption event that happens to that piece of data, right? And I think that later on, Junaid can talk about like how that affects data centers, how that affects the edge, how that can affect mesh networks. But essentially, we log all that and report it back. So, and gives you the ability to revoke access to data, revoke access to users, endpoints, applications, that sort of thing. So just to jump over into our dashboard, we have a communication suite of products that is very, you can think of it like a proof of concept in a lot of ways, but it's forms, it's chat, it's emails, just to let people understand how this works. But really what we're looking for is for people to start incorporating our API into their applications. And so folks that have done that are like Hulva for encrypted video, Boss Controls for secure energy, Hub Networks for secure fiber, and working on some of the stuff that Junaid is with NASA as well. But within our management portal here, every message that gets sent is tracked within this, and you'll see that it's shows the resource, the application, when it expires, its status. Has anyone tried to do something to the data to give you pause? So within this, you'll see that the each of the individual messages, all the recipients are there. You can revoke access to them, grant access, and you can have see the activity log for everything that happens to that piece of data. Now that's the overall communication suite. For the actual developer tools, we make it really easy to just come in, sign up for free, add an application, get your keys, and then we have a series of SDKs and tutorials that are available online, along with an API reference to walk you through setting this up. And essentially, we're trying to be like the Stripe for encryption, right? The encryption happens at the edge within the SDK, so you have complete control over it. And we use like standard encryption techniques. But the idea here being that you have complete control over your data, and you're able to have this very plug and play zero trust solution that's added with a few lines of code, right? So within this, you can come back and track every single event that happens within each one of your, encryption event that happens to your data, no matter where it is. This will load in just a moment. Zoom is always good for making things slow. And there are all these different types of events, like did someone request the key? Has another user been authenticated to your data? What's the geolocation or the geofence associated with that? What's the time associated with it? So every event is tracked here, and this is also tied into webhooks as well. So you can feed this back into any other platform as well. So the idea is to make it very simple to use. All this can get set up like with, I think, 12 API calls total, and you can have essentially a plug and play zero trust service built into your application. And within the documentation, I'm also really interested to hear what you guys have to say about the different kind of SDKs that you'd want to see, what makes an SDK worth using. How do you prove out that you want to use an API within a few minutes of coming to it? Like, what can we do that within 10 minutes you knew exactly that this solved your problem and you wanted to use it? Junie, do you have any additional thoughts or comments that you want to add?
No, this is great. I just want to add to Brian's comment that XQ is a developer-focused company. So we take feedback from developers. Really, it's the most important thing, because we want to create tools that developers use, and they just kind of download and go. Because that's key to the XQ positioning of how it wants to go to market. XQ doesn't go to market directly with customers. It's really helping app developers integrate zero trust into their product or service. So I actually wanted to do something different. I didn't know that Dr. Modi was going to sign in. So Dr. Modi is actually an important guy. He's doing some of the most advanced projects in America right now for NASA, but he's also doing some of the most important projects for the Department of Defense on 5G. And he leads a number of projects that have teams of developers coming together. And because he's here, I want to take advantage of him, because he lives and breathes this. Purva, I don't know if hopefully you're not on another call, but I would just like your perspective, since you lead so many teams. What do you look for when you are assembling either products or technologies into the solution? What do you like and what don't you like as a warning sign? And also maybe if you could comment on government requirements. I know there's some intellectual property things that are kind of strict. So I know you're not scheduled to talk, but just because you're here and because of all the work you're doing, I think not just XQ, but the other developers would want your insight.
I mean, thanks, Junaid. I really, yeah, you're right. I was not scheduled to talk. In fact, I was like quietly having my kombucha. I've started brewing kombucha, and so I was quietly enjoying that. But anyways, so just to kind of tell you a little bit about the company that I created in 2019, Aeronaculus. In fact, this week is the second year of the company starting, and we've been pretty successful. I did not realize that we would be so successful, but we are working on. So the first thing, of course, is like, where government is putting the money, right? And there's a lot of interest in zero trust architecture, although the infrastructure bill right now, it doesn't call cybersecurity clearly or state or talk about cybersecurity. There are lots of different bills which are likely to fund anything and everything to do with cybersecurity. So that is kind of an indication of where the market is going, right? I mean, what the government wants. And then of course, you have to figure out, where the commercial industry is going as well, and what the needs of the commercial industry are. So we normally, try to figure all that out. And then the other way that we also kind of build our community is to find out who is doing state-of-the-art research and development in the same area, right? And it would be good if we can partner with them. In many cases, it's difficult to partner with somebody who's a little bit ahead of you. I mean, when I created my company, we had one person, right? That was myself. I was basically, the CEO, the janitor, the accountant, everything, right? And but the good thing is I knew a lot of people in the community, and we started kind of partnering with people because we were too small. And then we started putting in a lot bigger proposals, right? So we started with small proposals, a couple of projects to NASA. This was actually the niche that I'm really known for, because I've got lots of patents in that area, patents and papers published. And so I was already an industry expert in that particular area for communications, cognitive communications. And so that was not that difficult, right? We got into NASA space. And then once we got into NASA space, people recognized us. We made a couple of press releases. And then now we are starting to really focus on what is the niche for Aeronaculus, in terms of how we take some of the investment that the government has made into us and convert that into commercial products. So we got 3 or 4 different pathways. And then, of course, through Junaid, we are going to partner with XQ as well, where XQ would provide niche capability on end-to-end connectivity and security, right? And Aeronaculus will keep focusing on its main core expertise, which is, intelligent networking from space to smart cities. So that's what we plan to do.
Yeah, so could you share some thoughts? Because I know you're doing very complex systems where you're bringing in code blocks from different vendors. You've got the cognitive radio, you've got machine learning. I believe your AI inference engine is coming. Do you have any thoughts to share on what you like to see when you're integrating code? Or, in terms of APIs? I know it's a kind of blue sky question, but
yeah,
I'm just trying to get your insight on how would you figure out if something is worth doing or not, or how do you perceive risk in software to know that it's working? I know it's kind of odd question, but
so I'm not a software developer, frankly, but I've worked on enough projects where we've developed lots of software. I mean, I think the most important thing is systems architecture, right? I believe in blocks, right? So like each block has got its own function, and then what is the interface between the blocks? How do the 2 blocks are communicating? What is each block doing in the system? So I really believe in that systems architecture viewpoint. I mean, I think that a good program or good project or good commercial product, you always need to spend a lot of time in that, developing a systems architecture, developing the APIs, and then of course if you start talking about the security, you also need to figure out what are the security aspects between different interfaces, right? How they can be compromised. That is extremely important. So each interface into the system and out of the system or within the system could be compromised. Mm-hmm. And so how exactly you develop a system, that is extremely important. So, and I think it's easier to explain to people when you have like a systems architecture, that this is what our system does overall, and then this is what each of the blocks do.
Yeah, so I know there's a requirement in the government to do open source. And one of the things XQ is certainly considering is the open source, right? But I guess one of my concerns is the support of open source. Yeah. Is because it's a double-edged sword, because it can also have vulnerabilities baked into it, or you don't know what someone's going to do, and then there's a lot. How have you kind of handled that on the RF side, or what thoughts do you have on making everything open?
So I was actually taking an interview of one of former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense actually last week, and Dr. Lisa Porter. And in fact, she also mentioned that, first thing that comes is open interfaces, right? Then we go to open source. So first, let's expose the interfaces, make sure everybody's able to talk to each other. And then you can potentially have, proprietary blocks or modules that you can put in your system. That is fine, as long as the interface is open. So that is extremely important, right? And then open source is the next step. That really actually makes things less vulnerable, because you know exactly what the source code is. A lot of people have seen it. There's less vulnerability because it's open.
Mhm.
I would open it out to the floor from the developers who have joined us today. Do you consider open source something that is required when you're looking at different security APIs to integrate into your different applications?
You probably have to call out a name, put somebody on the spot.
Oh, only because Ben Hoffman's mic isn't mute. I'll ask Ben first.
Yeah, so I mean, I like to be able to, at least in theory, audit security related code, and that's why I like open source code. Now, in practice, I don't really read through it very much. I just trust that like the people who are providing it like do audit it. The phrase "given enough eyeballs, all bugs become shallow" is, I think, kind of vital, especially on something security related.
That's really good feedback. Ben, before I go to the next person, do you have any other resources that you currently look at as a trusted kind of advisor in terms of deciding what APIs you do use and where you go to research those?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, our product doesn't have a ton of APIs. It's like external API calls in it right now. We're still kind of working on the core of the product. So when it comes time to start building more integrations with other systems, I guess the way that I would approach it is, you look at the biggest providers out there, and you just have to assume that they have enough money to throw at security.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. I'll just ask a few more people and then we'll go on to the next question. Matthew, I'm wondering on your point, how important, having an API that has been open sourced is when you're deciding whether or not to use it. And then the second question is, outside of whether that API is open source, where do you go to find your information when you're looking for a new API?
Wow, but on the spot. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat with the last with Ben, where we don't leverage a ton of external APIs. Definitely open source is a factor in the decision, but it's usually something that we're able to take and propose to our security team, and have them validate whether or not it's going to be healthy and appropriate for us to use.
Well, thank you. Is there a reason why you guys aren't using external? Is it because you're focusing on the core product right now, or are you against using external APIs?
Yeah, we're just focusing on core essentially, and plan to integrate API stuff down the road. But until we get our core offering more rounded out, we don't have opportunity to use much of the fancier things that we'd like to.
No, that's really valuable. Matt, do you have any websites or platforms or educational sources that you use when you're looking for new APIs?
No, I just like to read the actual API documentation myself. That's usually where I start, and then it's always nice to see if there's a solid community built up, so you could see if there's a blog or any other kinds of frequently asked questions that you might be able to short circuit some of the earlier questions you might have while assessing the API. Sorry for the screaming cat in the background.
Oh no, that's okay. My dog is here too. He is always whining. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah, welcome.
I'll ask one more person before I pass it back to Junaid. Karan, I'm wondering your perspective from a open source perspective first, Is that an important factor to you when you're making a decision about using an API, and specifically in security?
Yep, definitely, it's an important factor, because see, if I talk about myself, I can probably correlate with what Apurva said. I'm not a code developer, to be honest, but I know how the things works at the back end and how the things should work. I am currently or mostly working on microservices, and it's very important for microservices to have an API so that different components of a microservices can talk to each other. And when it comes to API selection, it depends. It depends, and because I have a huge team, and it's not just one person responsibility to look for the APIs, securities, and which APIs to use, which API not to use. We work as a team, and there are different guys within a team who provide their input, and then probably with the client and with the stakeholders and with the C-level, not with the C-level executive, but probably the higher management. We sit together and then we discuss the ways of having a better APIs. But personally, if I talk about myself, I've used one of the website which is called Technology Advice, which probably wherein you can probably get like some APIs, good APIs, and what are the important factors, how the security concern would get improved and all that. So this is what my say is.
Well, I really appreciate that. That's really good. I actually haven't heard of that website. So shortly after this meeting, I'll definitely be checking that one out. And I'll pass it back to Junaid now to further discuss everything that we've been talking about today. And Junaid, I'm going to put you on the spot now, since you've been putting everyone else on the spot. Would you be able to describe to everyone on the call the importance of zero trust and why? And Junaid has, he was involved in the original zero trust that came to market many years ago. And his focus was really moving away from focusing on securing the network to the data. Junaid, I'd love you to describe to everyone on the call today why you think that is so important, and how using it from an API perspective allows companies to integrate security a lot easier.
Well, from my perspective, it's pretty simple. We wouldn't be having this call or be talking about zero trust if the existing security solutions are working, and they're not at a massive scale. Every few weeks we have a massive ransomware attack, of which credential theft is the oldest security hack, but still lethal. We have all kinds of security vulnerabilities in our power grid, in our infrastructure. So the question is, what's wrong here? And here's my perspective. You have the software developer ecosystem, which is $1 trillion ecosystem. It's gigantic. It's the biggest technology ecosystem on the planet, right? Literally millions of developers creating everything, counting. And living off of that software developer ecosystem are industries that support it, like the server industry, the cloud compute industry, the mobile phone manufacturing industry, and the security industry. And what's happening is people are writing their code, finishing their product, and then they hand it over to somebody. Could be a government agency, it could be a bank, could be accounting company, and then that customer, the end user, then buys security products to secure it, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work because at best the security people are putting on band-aids or doing some kind of protection. At worst, they're doing something totally useless and doesn't stop the cyber attack, as we see in ransomware. So my interest in zero trust is not just the model, but embedding zero trust into the software application, which I think is a game changer. So that is, what if we as system designers, as software developers on this call, could integrate security into the application software, so it's already there. I think that can be a huge game changer for everybody involved. Now, the tricky part and why we're reaching out to developers like we are today is that's a different approach to creating a product. That's not like, here's a product and you give it to the software developer. It's much more an iterative dialogue, which is, what do software developers want? How do they want the zero trust packaged? how do they want to integrate it into their product, whether it's a video conferencing product or space communications product, so that it's seamless and makes everything better. And there's a notion of API calls, but there's also a notion of where do you inject yourself into the product? Are you injecting yourself as a virtual network interface? I mean, there's a bunch of items we need to figure out. And where I'm going with this is I think the emerging market of DevSecOps, which I read as DevSecOps is the integration of security into the development cycle, is where the industry is going to go. It's going to be massive. And then, Apurva actually said something interesting, which is, don't worry about the open source, worry about open APIs, right? Maybe the opportunity for everybody on this call is, why don't we define some APIs that are the most useful to everybody and then just put it out there, have XQ just do it, right? So it's just available and off it goes. And like I said, the business model for XQ is actually not to charge developers. So, developers won't have to pay anything, and it's an open API, so that I think it's a way to really change security. And I really believe, I've worked in security a long time. Security as a product separate from the application doesn't work, and it's not working. We need to have security integrated into the application stack. So, I actually wanted to go around ask some of the developers what they think of DevSecOps. Is that a philosophy that you think is real? Because zero trust is an enabling technology, right? But the question is, what is it enabling? You're seeing the big companies like Cisco, Palo Alto integrated into products, and that makes a lot of sense. But if you're if you're a software person, you're like, well, that's a different industry, right? So, Kelby, since you're better at asking people, do you want to see if you want to poll the group on DevSecOps, and don't people get a prize for showing up here? I thought they're
yes, you all do. You all will get a Amazon gift card if you show up here and follow us on LinkedIn. We're really appreciative of all of you guys providing your feedback today. So
everybody's a winner of an Amazon gift card.
That's right. So I think that, it would be great to get some feedback. One thing is, what do you think about DevSecOps? And the other question is, Junaid brought up a really good point that right now, software development and security are siloed. So you develop the software and you pass it over to the security individuals to secure that software. Now, our API enables security to be embedded into the very fabric of your technology. What we want to know is, are you as a developer tasked with security? And how important is security to you? Because right now, they're very siloed, and what we want to do is enable you as developers to actually not have to pass that software on to a security developer. So we'd love to kind of hear some feedback. I will go around the virtual room. How about Daniel Geiger first, if you don't mind?
All right, Daniel, come on, you got to talk. Apurva's going to poke you. You got to say something.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't know much about the topic. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, thank you for unmuting. From there, we will go on. R. Bowers, would you mind providing your feedback on, DevSecOps and whether you think that that's a growing field? And then also in terms of your responsibilities, historically developers develop software and pass it off to security. What we're looking to do is enable you to actually manage security from the ground level up.
Yeah, I have to basically provide audit and logging to a security team. So they have basically want to either see files that they have to be able to scoop up, or I have to send them into their system.
So that is really interesting. So audit is something that you are tasked with, at least enabling the network so that you can pull all of that information. Junaid, would you mind speaking a little bit about one of the really big, value props of XQ? Because we split every data packet into smaller packets, every time that data, anything happens to it, it's logged. And so from a compliance and audit perspective, we really are providing a lot of value to various different regulatory bodies and auditing bodies. Junaid, could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, if you saw Brian flip through his screens, you may have missed it, that one of the things he showed was that every transaction is logged from a zero trust perspective. So zero trust is a very specific logging model. It's NIST 800, I think it's 171, which says you have to show where's the data encrypted, who did the encryption, where's the data gone, how many attempts were there to unlock the data. So that is the zero trust model, and it's a little bit different than the standard kind of logging that you get with Splunk. So XQ has integrated that into the engine itself, so that you can't actually do something without it being logged. So instead of like doing things and then worrying about it being logged and is it logged or not, it's kind of fully integrated in. So one of the goals in developing a zero trust stack is to actually simplify the compliance part. So that is, no matter what you're doing, whether it's an accounting program or a smart energy, even if you don't need the compliance level logging, that is actually built into zero trust. So one of the things we're trying to do, and again, it's a developer concept, is to say, we're not just trying to catch up with the people who make boxes. My software, whatever my software is, whether it's an accounting software or video software or space communication software, it's got the full stack of features to support regulations and compliance built in, right? It's this notion security is built in, or secure by design, not just the cryptography, but the compliance. And that's the kind of thing. So one of the things we're looking for as we work with developers, and as Brian showed, all our tools are, XQ tools are online for free. So, I'd encourage after this call for you to poke around. And the idea is that we'd be having another one of these calls in a little while. And hopefully if the group wants, they can be on a regular basis, where things you like, and more importantly, things you don't like, you share with everybody. And then we just get better and better, right? As a team, and we just make zero trust more integrated. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Thanks, Kelly, for putting me on the spot again.
Well, I'll put someone else on the spot now, Junaid. Venkat, I wanted to, ask you about what you think about DevSecOps. And then, if you could further describe your responsibilities as a developer when it comes to security.
Yeah, hello. Can you able to hear me? Clearly? Okay. So, yeah, I'm working as an integration developer. So to use this, I'm using a lot of products like ETL and service products. When it comes to security, I do have to provide like what kind of fields I am using for data masking. So there are some customer sensitive information like customer address and email. I need to make sure that I need to mask it, and then I have to use some kind of product level securities, how that security is working. Is there any possibility to encrypt, to decrypt their security levels by developing a simple POC, and as well as the checklist for the response time, those kind of things.
That is very interesting. Junaid, would you be able to speak a little bit about, some of our techniques when it comes to data masking from like customer address, customer email, and how we're able to segment all of those out, even if that data is pulled from an application and goes to a data lake, for example? And so, why, XQ provides a really unique and fundamental difference to the security that's currently available.
So one of the important ideas in zero trust is zero trust works at many levels. One of the ideas is if you're not authenticated and authorized, you don't get the decryption key. So that is really good when you're worried about ransomware or data exfiltration. So imagine a data lake where people are pushing in data, and then somebody gets the password of the admin and then takes all the data out of the data lake. Well, XQ is very good at that, because when the data is stolen, the cyber attacker has the wrong identity, or even if they've stolen the identity of the admin, they're in the wrong location in the world, so they don't get it. And you say, well, that's really good. But what about running applications inside the data lake? Well, XQ does something interesting. When you have a file or a record, XQ can actually encrypt the fields using different keys. So this is important when you're doing something like smart cities. So imagine in a smart city where you have data of all the citizens, water bills, power bills, people parking, and then say you have a program, and the program is a billing program, and say it's just looking at, parking, parking spots. It just wants to generate a bill to pull it from the credit card. Well, that program doesn't need access to all the data, like your tax data, because it's not relevant. And it's also dangerous to give programs access to everything, because say that program is a fake, it's put in by a cyber attacker. So XQ, using the zero trust model, not only has zero trust in people outside the data lake, it also has zero trust for applications inside the data lake. So it says if you are a program and the name of your program is monthly parking fees, that's the name of your program, it looks up your name of the program and it says, oh, the monthly parking fee program only should have access to, say, license plate and the number of parking spots they use. Anything else, your taxes, your this, street corner lights, whatever, you don't have access to. So it'll unlock the fields only around the parking spots and the license plate associated to do automated parking. So one of the things we are working with, and this is a new concept, when we talk about extending zero trust into the data world, we're actually developing new constructs that actually don't exist. So right now, when people think of access to storage farms, it's kind of very binary. Either you don't have access or you do have access. We think that's incorrect, because there's a lot of cases where things do get access, but they have too much access, or they have access to everything, which again opens you up for massive data exfiltration and ransomware, because someone can come in and say, oh, I'm a billing program, or I'm this I'm just a statistical program. Let me look at all the data and copy it and pull it out. And the answer is no, we're not going to do that. We want to know who you are. What is the name of your application, right? And based on the application name, we are going to authorize you for only a small slice of what's in the data lake. So kind of what we're doing here, and why talking to developers like yourself is important, is actually, we're actually inventing new ideas and concepts of what zero trust means in the software world, right? And you can search for it online, and I bet you'll find nothing. So
are you saying, Junaid, that with this technology, could have you prevented, Edward Snowden, for example, from exfiltrating all of the data from that data lake?
Yeah, so what we would have done in the Edward Snowden case is, because he had access to the raw laptops, he would have actually been able to steal the data, but it would have been in its encrypted state. And when he tried to unlock it, the system wouldn't unlock, right? Because the system would say, oh, you've got to be the authorized user sitting at your desk inside, in his case, I guess he was sitting at CIA in Hawaii. That's all we do. So, you can't really stop the theft of data. That's actually very difficult to do, because at some point, someone can actually rip out the storage system and walk out the door. And you say, well, you can't really stop that. But what you can do is not unlock the data electronically. That is doable. So when we talk about zero trust, we say, just because you have access to the data, just because you have the phone and this data is stored on the phone, we're saying we have zero trust in you, whoever you are. So unless we know who you are, where you are, we're not going to give you that decryption key. And that is a kind of deeper, new way to think about zero trust, which is, well, it's kind of new. So part of what we're trying to do is work with developers to bring this new concept out. And it could be a game changer, or we hope it's a game changer. But more importantly, this only works if software developers feel it makes their software better, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the big idea, right?
Something we often talk about here at XQ with our clients is having security be a business enabler, right? So with secure video encryption that we've done with a business partner, that's enabled them to go out and get, a multitude of government contracts. In the financial services industry, there are certain banks that weren't able to bring on SaaS products because those SaaS products didn't meet the security requirements. So by integrating XQ, then they would be able to meet the security requirements of the bank itself, no longer limiting the cybersecurity or cloud security group at a company to be kind of that limiting barrier to integrate new different technologies. So there's only around 7 minutes left in the call, and I know that when we were introducing ourselves, some of you mentioned you had some questions that you directly like to ask a cybersecurity expert like Junaid Islam. So I'm going to pass it on to the floor to see if there's any questions that you guys have that we might be able to help you with. So I wrote everyone's name down when they were doing the introduction. So I'll just start at the top. Ben, do you have any questions? You work in esports, definitely an industry where there's secure credit card information, customer information, all of that. Do you have any questions for Junaid or XQ that we could help you with?
Yeah, so the biggest one for me is, how do I push a culture of security on my team? Obviously, security is like one of those things that, because it's treated like an outside aspect of the platform, and like you're wrapping your application in a bubble and you're trying to make sure that nothing gets through that bubble. That's not really the best way to promote security. But then you also deal with a lot of devs who that's not the first thing they think about because that culture just hasn't been pushed before.
That's a great question. And it kind of even goes back to what we were talking about, how software and security are almost siloed, and we want to integrate that all together, because I think then it does push a culture of, how much security is important. But I'll pass it over to Junaid, who really is the expert. Junaid, maybe you can talk about your time at Coca-Cola or some of the other projects you've worked on where they were able to do a top-down approach.
So, so you touched on something important, which is, and I'm going to paraphrase you a little bit and say, why bother? Why bother doing any of this? And I would say there's two reasons. And so we're testing this idea. So as Kelby mentioned, one of the ideas we want to refine with developers is your product worth more if it is secure? Right? And hopefully the answer is yes. Now, Ben, you said something a little important, which is, what if people just don't care, right? Which is tricky. So related to that is, what happens to our business if our product fails? So that's the opposite or other side of the coin, which is, okay, the good is, we're better. The flip side is, well, maybe we fail less. But I think what I get out of your statement is it's probably important for us as a group, and I use the word, we're the Zero Trust software developer community. This meeting is historic, that we probably have to get good at expressing the economics of integrating Zero Trust into applications for everybody in the community, right? So that even the downstream users say, hey, let's work with people in this group, right? We want this to be a win for everybody. So hopefully that answers your question, but it's more like work we need to do. Go ahead.
Yeah. So.
Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, it's kind of an answer to my question. I mean it more like, because I'm in charge of the project and I recognize that nobody cares about security until a breach has already happened. Like, how do you change that culture? Like, how do you, and the thing about like everything being on the cloud now, and the thing about like everything being driven by APIs now, is that like formerly really difficult topics that required a lot of like math and research level understanding, like security, are available now for random developers who are at any skill level. So like, you know, the question you're asking is how do we build the right product? The question I'm asking is, I want desperately for everyone on my team to always be thinking about ways that they can make sure that breaches can't happen in the application. But you know, there's business people you need to fight against, and then there's developers who are just more interested in building things that like feel good and move quickly. And so the task is kind of convincing them that you know, it doesn't have to be hard to integrate security into your application. You just have to understand what is meant by security, basically.
Yeah, I think that there's an interesting way to approach this, and it's almost like a framework approach from a dev perspective. Like you're setting up several. I mean, I'm not sure how you run your team exactly, but when you're setting up like the basic parameters of, hey, we're using these tools, we're using these libraries, that sort of thing, and if you have like the XQ built in as like sort of a base library, and you can even like develop an interface for it. I think that Ike's got one available, so that like anytime that anyone wants to send any information outside of that application, whether it's to a database or a network call or something like that, it just sort of automatically has to hit the security. So you can build it into the framework so that like it's almost like an automated thing that they don't even have to think about, like sort of almost behind the any of the network calls is one way to do it from a framework perspective. And then there are ways also to do this from a DevSecOps thing in terms of just building it into encrypting all of your code when it's at rest versus when it gets like sent to GitHub or whatnot. So I think that for asking people to be active about security, we found to be difficult. You know, your point, like it's not on their mind, so you have to make it a no-brainer. It's got to be plug and play. So one of the things we're saying here is like we're trying to make the security aspect of it so easy to integrate that it just becomes that kind of thing where like, hey, this is just sort of a base call in all of our projects in a way. It's built into it, and then it's just part of your. There are other ways to build security into like your workflow as well. Some of which XQ addresses, some of which are like other sort of there are other solutions for as well. But I think that making it something that people don't have to think about is almost the only way to do it.
And I would add two things to that. So one thing is that you know, security in general is really a reactive industry. On average, it takes 283 days to identify a data breach within America. So what we've done is we've really looked at security and said, how can we change it from a reactive industry to a proactive industry? So like Junaid was bringing up with XQ, once you've integrated that, every time data is accessed or there's an attempt of access, no matter where it is in the world, we're able to flag access that doesn't, you know, match the historical places where that data has been accessed from, or whether there's been an attempted access that wasn't successful. So what that does is, you know, on a real-time basis, changes security from being a reactive industry to a proactive industry. Now, when I look at security as a whole, and I think how do you change the mentality and how do you allow companies to really, and developers to really make sure that security is a value that they keep top of mind, I think it has to be a top-down approach as well. So there's a Fortune 500 company a number of years ago. The board of directors identified that it was really important that their information was not breached. So much so that they made a clause in the CEO's contract that said if there was a data breach of this information, that CEO could be fired with cause. What did that do? That, you know, this is a massive company within America. What that did was that CEO immediately invested in security and immediately made job performance tied to data security. So, you know, as a whole, I think that our industry has to really look at it from this impacts our financial, our reputational, and our personnel. And, you know, that's obviously longer term, Ben.
Great. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Please make sure that Kelby has your email so you get your Amazon gift card.
Yeah, and additionally, it's been really great talking with all of you. And of course, we didn't have enough time to go through everyone's questions. If you guys wouldn't mind directly following up with me, just Kelby, KELBY at xqmessage.com. I'll share it in the messages here. If you have any other questions or you want to set up a meeting with myself, Brian, Junaid, or Mark, who's our head of product, we'd be more than happy to meet with you guys, talk about your specific challenges, and discuss if there's any opportunity for us to work together. Like Junaid said earlier on, we want this to be a continuing event. We really appreciate you guys joining us today. So whatever we can do to help you, we're more than willing to do, because we find, that always comes back tenfold. That's how I live my life, at least. So thank you guys so much. And if you could share with myself or Lauren your emails so that we can get you your Amazon gift card, that would be great. And outside of that, please feel free to follow up directly with me or anyone else on the team. And we'd love to set up a call to kind of walk you through some of the products that we've developed that kind of prove our concept as well, that you might be able to integrate into your website and applications immediately.
Great. Thanks for your time then.
Thank you, everyone.